All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Digital Inclusion Week, Day 3. I'm going to be kind of your host for the time being while we wait for people to file in. My name is Anthony Hake, and today we'll be listening to Chris Palmer talk about making music with SonicPi. So, till people start filing in, I'm just going to kind of hang out here. Feel free to introduce yourselves as you come in. Is my mic still on? Yes. Good. Good. I was about to say, am I just saying nothing here? Okay. All right, again, as people file in, feel free to introduce yourself. Perhaps maybe even tell us what you saw that made you want to go to Digital Inclusion Week. Like, where did you find out about this? All right, so we've got share link. Awesome. I'm going to post this to the event page so that we can start getting some people in here. There's that one. All right. All right. That's posted. Let's see if we can get a link in the chat. That way you guys that are here can copy the URL and share it with your friends. The more people we get in here, the better. There's the link. Events. We're going to give it about 5 more minutes. We'll start at 6:10. share this everywhere it'll go. Share now. Alright. See, we've got 4 people watching so far. Feel free to, give a shout out, introduce yourself, how you heard about Digital Inclusion Week, and there is a link in the chat where you can copy that and share it with your friends so you guys can watch together. Should probably mention, again, this is for day 3 of Digital Inclusion Week, making music with SonicPi. So if you're here for Chris Palmer's talk, you're in the right place. All right. All right, so looks like we got a couple of people watching so far. We're gonna start a couple of minutes here. I'm just, facilitating the event. What's gonna happen is I'm going to hand it over to Chris Palmer, and he's gonna take the show from there. And then afterwards, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end over Hangouts. I'm going to have Chris Palmer on call, and he'll try his best to answer any questions you might have. And we also encourage that you follow along. If you are interested in making music with SonicPi, there is a link in the description of the live stream showing you exactly where you can go to download it. It's for Windows, Mac, Linux. I saw all sorts of options there. And the best thing about this is that once it's all said and done, you can rewind the tape and see if there's a part you didn't quite get, don't quite understand. But we encourage that you ask Palmer any questions you may have while he's still available. All right, welcome to the stream, Ryan Lachlan. He is a computer science major at YSU, and he's a member of Youngstown Penguin Hackers. All right, and he says he's here for obvious reasons. Well, we're all excited about SonicPi and making music with programming. I don't think you need to be a computer science major to have those attributes, but it shows that you're excited, and that's a good thing. Oh, okay. Correction. He will actually be answering the questions in the live chat. He's in the chat with us. Since the video is yep, that sounds about right. All right, it is 6:10. We're gonna get this show on the road. I know I've been such a charming host, but now I gotta hand it over to the main event. Enjoy Chris Palmer's Making Music with SonicPi.
Hi, I'm Chris Palmer, a YSU alumni and software developer. Today for Digital Inclusion Week, I'm going to be talking about live coding music using SonicPi. Now you may have never heard the term live coding before, so let me explain that. Live coding is the practice of using specialized software to write code that is used to create music, often in a live setting, meaning that the code is being written and rewritten as the performance goes on. This coding or programming basically defines a set of rules or instructions that the computer uses to play samples or synthesize its own sounds, sort of a digital sheet music for it. These two ways of making sounds, samples and synthesis, are what we'll be talking about today. Sample-based music uses pre-recorded sounds that can be manipulated on the fly. For example, slowing down or speeding up the sample, changing the pitch, adjusting the attack, decay, sustain, release, and many more. The other common way to make sounds using SonicPi is to synthesize them. In SonicPi, this is done by selecting a synth sound and telling it what note to play. Now, the idea of writing code may sound intimidating to people who don't have a background in it, but today we'll be keeping it fairly simple by just using some basic programming principles. To get started with SonicPi, the first thing you'll want to do is go to sonicpi.net. You just scroll down, find your operating system that you're running, click it, and it'll take you down here to where you can download and install SonicPi on your machine. Okay, once you have SonicPi downloaded and opened, you should see a screen that looks something like this. Over here, you have a bunch of buttons of things that you can turn on or off or not show. Over here, you'll have your run, stop, and record, save, and load. In the preferences, you can kind of adjust how your editor looks, how SonicPi behaves, and a bunch of other things. In my opinion, the most important setting is to turn on dark mode to save your eyes from looking at a white screen all day. Next, we'll look at the help section. This will be very useful with getting started with SonicPi. Over here, we've got tutorials where they will walk you through using SonicPi step by step. Next, we have examples. These are pieces of music that are written out in code that you can copy from down here and play up there. And then you can go through and change any of the variables with this, such as, let's make it a slower BPM. The next section at the bottom that we'll be looking at is the Synth Section. This is a list of all the synthesizers that you'll have access to out of the box with SonicPi. You can click on any of the synth sounds to learn more about it. It'll explain what the type of synthesizer is, what the default parameters are, and then what parameters you have access to change. In the effects section, these are the effects that you can apply to either your samples or synthesizers in SonicPi. Again, you can go in here, see what the default options are, see an example of how to use it, and then see what options you have available. Next, we have the samples section. This gives a list or categories of all the samples. You can then click on them, see what samples are available in here, and then try them out on your own. Let's do that right now. The next section down here is the language section. This is your resource for checking all of the commands that you have available to you in SonicPi. One of the most important ones that we'll be learning about shortly is live loop. When you click on the command, you can then scroll through the documentation where it describes how it works, and then at the end you have a list of examples. Now let's get started. We already tried using a sample once where we say sample percussion bell. That's going to just play that sample once and then end. SonicPi, as well as most programming, works in a similar way where it's basically just a list of commands that it's telling the computer to do in order. If we wanted to make a really simple drum beat, it would be very tedious to put all of these samples in order. Now see, we've got these 4 samples here that are alternating. We could just copy this and paste this as many times as we want to try and get it to repeat this loop. But you'll see very shortly that we run into a problem right here. So let me hit run. Okay. That all kind of just sounded like one big noise. So we're going to need to use another command in SonicPi here. That's the sleep command. To do this and make your music in this way without using any kind of loops or anything would take a long time, and you'd have to explicitly say every single command that you want SonicPi to run. Here, let's check this out real quick. That sure seems like a lot of work for not a lot of payoff. So, we're going to use something called a live loop. Live loops work like this. First you use the live loop command, then you name your loop something. I'm going to call it A just for simplicity, and then you type the word do. To signify that your live loop is over, you add the word end. Everything that is in here will continue to loop, and if you rerun it, it won't stop the loop, but it'll update what's going on in here. So let's try that real quick. So a live loop will continue to repeat itself while doing whatever you say in here, and if you change it or update it while your performance is going on, it won't stop anything, and the next time the loop comes around, it'll update it and keep it going. So here's an example of that. There you could see that while the live loop was running and playing the bass drum sample, I added the snare sample and added another sleep timer. And then when I hit run, it updated it and kept going without stopping the sample or anything. Now, another way to store your samples is going to be in a list instead of one after the other. We're going to make a list, which in Ruby you do by giving a variable name, which you can call whatever you want as long as it isn't a reserved word like live loop or anything that'll autocomplete like that. I couldn't call it sample or synth or sync or anything that essentially shows up when you start typing like that. I'm going to call this list of samples. Then I use an equal sign, which means that everything to the right is going to be assigned to the variable on the left, and then use these square brackets. So the square brackets signify that there's going to be a sequence of things in there. Let's do that right now. Let's copy the bass drum sample and the snare sample. Now, instead of having to type this out all the time, we can just use another loop inside our live loop. This loop will look a little bit different. To do this, we'll say list of samples, which is our variable up here, followed by a period and the word each. Then we say do the pipe character or vertical line, and then we have another variable name in here. I'm going to just use I, because that's a pretty common programming variable for an iterator like this. Then you add the end command. In here, we're going to say sample I, and then sleep 0.5. So sample I, what that means is that this loop here, list of samples.each, that's going to go through this list here, and on each item, it'll assign it to I. Then it'll run the code between there and the end command. So it will essentially set I equal to BD, or this bass drum sample. Then it'll play that sample. Then it'll sleep for half of a beat. Then at the end, it'll loop back to this list of samples, then assign I to the next thing in the list, play that sample, and then sleep for half a beat. Once there's nothing left in the list for it to assign, it'll exit this end here, which will go to this end, and loop back to the beginning of the live loop. Check it out. Also, you could write out like your what the pattern you want your drum beat to be in a long form here in the list. Live coding music is normally very challenging to make it sound a specific way, like most normal music that you've heard before. However, it can be a powerful tool for writing different kinds of music. For example, if you wanted to generate a random pattern every time, you could use some of the random functions that are provided with SonicPi. To do that, we're going to use another loop to populate this list up here. First, let's clear this out. And let's say we want our pattern to be 16 samples long. This is how in Ruby we write a loop that will loop around 16 times. So, I did a couple of things here. First, we're taking the list of samples, which is an empty list, and 16 times we're going to push, which means add something to it. Basically, we're going to be adding another sample at the end, and choose. Choose is going to take this list that gets passed into it and randomly select something out of it. So, by the end, we should end up with a list of samples that's 16 samples long, and they will be random. So let's try that out. It almost starts to sound like music if you let it play long enough. However, if we run this again, it'll be the exact same pattern as it was last time. So, to make it more interesting, and so that we have new music that gets generated each time, we're going to say use random seed, and this is basically a command that you can give it any number, and that will be the seed for whatever randomness that you have. And if it's the same number every time, then it'll give you the same output, which can be useful for some things. For what we're trying to do right here, though, we're going to want it to be different every time. So we're going to use time.now.to_i. What this does is it takes the current time, and then the current time, turns it into an integer, and then it's going to use that as the random seed. So every time you run it, it should be a different pattern. Okay, this sounds a little bit slow for what I'd want to hear, so I'm going to turn up the BPM a little bit. Since the default is 60, let's turn it up to 80 again. Now, if while it's running, I hit run again, that will generate a new random pattern. Awesome. So now we have kind of explored how to make interesting rhythmic beats using samples in SonicPi. Next, we're going to be talking about how to use the synthesizers to make chords and melodies. Okay, to get started on the melody side of things, we're going to put a stop command here so that it's not playing while I'm demonstrating other things. So, the basic way to do synthesis is by calling the play command. and followed by a note. In this case, we'll use C4. That seems like a good note. And there you go. That's a note. Kind of the same thing we ran into earlier with when you just put a sample there, it just plays it once. Same thing with play. So we're going to need another live loop probably if we want to make anything interesting. I'm just going to call this one B because that's what comes after A. Play C for sleep 0.5. Okay, so that's the same note over and over. Now, we can use the same patterns we used up here where we're generating a sequence of random samples, but this time we'll do it with notes. So, same kind of deal as up there. 16 times do, end. And then in here, we're going to have another list up here called melody. Again, this is me just assigning an empty list to list of samples and melody. And in here, we're going to take melody and push. So far it looks pretty similar to this. And then we're going to use choose, which is going to randomly select something from a list of things. And instead of explicitly writing out a list of all the notes that we could possibly use, which would be something like C4, D4, that's going to take a long time. So instead, we can use some of these functions that are built into SonicPi. So here you can go down to scale. This is going to be the documentation for this, and you can see you basically just give it the note that you want to start on and the type of scale. So we're going to say choose scale and then do C for major. Okay, so now this should give us 16 random notes in C, in the C major scale. And we'll do the same kind of thing we did up here. Now we'll say melody dot each do okay, and sleep 0.25, and then we'll just hit play I. So what that again will do is we'll have this list of notes in here, and it's basically going to play each note in the list. Okay. So the one problem I kind of hear with this is that the notes are sort of running into each other, which this is where that attack, decay, sustain, and release we talked about earlier comes into play. So if you go down to the help and go to the synth that we're using, which I think the default is sine, you can see all of the defaults for these things. Amplitude, pan, attack, decay, sustain, and release. And we can see that the release value is 1, but we're playing a new note every quarter of a beat. So instead of it being 1 beat that it's taking to release the note, let's shorten that up a bit. We'll change that to release 0.2, which should be a little bit tighter than what we're currently doing. There you can hear that the notes are getting cut off a bit more abruptly. Whereas if I change it to 0.3, 5, there you can hear this is basically just controlling how long the note is held once it starts playing. So let's leave it at 0.3. So the other problem with this is that it's just a continuous stream of notes. So if we wanted to make the melody a bit more interesting, what we can do is we can take this scale, which is just going to be a list of things, and add another list to it. So we're going to use another list that just has the letter R in it. This is a special character or special thing used by SonicPi to say that this is a rest. And instead of writing rest out multiple times, we can just multiply it. So R times 4 is the same thing as doing this. Doing this 4 times. So to save the space there, we'll just do a times 4. So now, okay, that's starting to sound more like a interesting melody to me. Now, the one thing I think it's missing is probably some chords. So let's add some chords to this. We're going to, again, use the same kind of pattern we've been using this whole time. Make an empty list of chords, do a loop where we add chords into that, and let's see, chords.push. So here, in this section, we're going to take the chords list, and 4 times we're going to push a new chord to that list. And to do that, we're going to use, instead of explicitly saying what chord or just doing random chords, we're going to use the chord degree command. And this, once again, you can go into the documentation here and read more about it. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to take a number, which is going to say what part of the scale to build the chord off of, and then build that chord. So we don't want to be choosing that number. We're going to use a random function, which in SonicPi is called rrand. There's 2 of them, rrand and rrandi. Rrandi will just return integers, so whole numbers that don't have anything after a decimal place. So we'll need that, and we're going to go 1 to 7. So that should choose any chord that starts on the 1st through 7th scale degree of the C major scale. So, by the time this runs, we should end up with 4 different chords there. Now, a good way to do this would be to throw another live loop in here. We'll call this C, for chords. And then we're going to have this live loop get queued by this one. So we will throw a Q in here, call that chords, and then here we're going to say sync. So basically what this does is when this command gets run, it's going to send a signal out to anything that has the sync, because the sync command is just going to wait for that command to be called before it does anything. And then we will just play the chords here. But to do that, we'll need chords.each, and in there we'll use the play chord command and play that, and then we'll sleep for 1 beat. So that should be 4 of these notes that get played before another chord gets played. Okay. So, if you notice there, this chords section didn't start until after the first one looped all the way through. In order for that to be fixed, you have to define this above the other one so that it knows that this sync is waiting for that. Otherwise, it just reads it straight down, hits the Q command before knowing that there's anything to be synced with it. Those chords are changing a little bit fast for my taste, so let's slow them down. Okay. And now to tie this all together, we will throw in these drum loops that we had from the beginning. So this one will be cueing drums. And again, in order for this to work properly, we'll have to move it below the other ones. And this will sync on drums. Okay. All right, so there I kind of went through some of the basics around SonicPi and hopefully maybe gave you some ideas of things you could do to play with SonicPi or like get something out of it. I hope anyone who's interested in this goes forward with it, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. This has been Chris Palmer with Oak Hill Collaborative. Thanks.
All right, and we are back. You can't see me, but rest assured, I'm still here. That was Chris Palmer's talk on live coding and using programming to make music. I have him on call here through Hangouts, so if anyone has any questions for him or has posted any questions in the chat, this would be the time for us to answer them. And how this is going to work, you're going to post it in the chat. I read it out here to Chris, and then he reads it out to reads out his answer. Like, he answers it for all of you here. So let's see. Nothing in the chat yet. I'm gonna give it about 5 minutes. One thing that I thought was really interesting was just like real music, even very small changes, such as changing one variable, can completely shake up how the end product sounds.
Yeah, that definitely can happen. I guess what specific example are you talking about there?
Well, when you started out in the beginning, one thing, like you noticed that the notes were really colliding into one another, so you fixed one variable. One variable was the deciding factor between this really fast, notes are just colliding one after another, to this laid out, more tight sounding rhythm beat. And I guess one question that I have, and I'm sure this has crossed the mind of many for those who have seen you do this talk before, is what is the potential for using SonicPi to make loops for beats and what am I trying to say here? What's popular in the area is that people like to sell their loops to rap artists, hip hop artists, and they make a living just off of that. So what's the full functionality of SonicPi in terms of making beats for aspiring artists?
Well, the whole idea of like generating music in some way or another, whether it's like rhythmic loops or something like that, that's kind of a developing field right now. Like there's more complicated ways that a lot of music can get generated that people are using often as like a supplemental kind of tool for making music. Using SonicPi, you could definitely do that. And I've done that before where you have something set up like what I had there, where it's all based on like these probabilities and like all this randomness. And often like you just hit play, it'll spit something out, something different out every time. And then you kind of get into this, since the creation part of it is so streamlined,
you then have more like backloaded effort on the selection time. It's a lot like if anyone's ever checked out Artbreeder or previously GANBreeder, you can basically combine a bunch of neural net genes to generate an image, and then you're still making the selections and like these fine adjustments and stuff. And the question kind of gets raised there, like, is that the same thing as someone who's practiced the technical skill to be able to draw these pictures or make this music? Is the selection and like the decision making process of it just as valuable, or is that the thing itself, and the technical aspect of learning the instrument or learning the tools is just a inconvenience that just happens to be there? I don't know. Those are a lot of I don't know about open questions, but those are some questions that come to mind there. Sorry to answer your question with a question.
Oh, not at all. Digital Inclusion Week is all about asking questions, and the more questions we put on the board, the more there is their answer. So I don't have any more questions personally. I'm just trying to think of some common ones. If we were doing this, down in the makerspace in person, I can see that being a question that would come up. Uh, I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I'm going to do a real quick outro here. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. Thank you for all the time and effort that you put into your talk here today. You did this last year, and we're really happy to see you doing this again. Your effort's always appreciated.
Well, thank you for having me.
Anytime, anytime. Now, this video is also going to be available after we're done going live. So if you were following along and trying to do what he did in SonicPi, you should be able to rewind to any parts should you have any confusion, and you can leave comments in the chat section even after the live video ends if you still have questions, and we'll get those answered in retrograde. So without a further ado, I don't see anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and close up shop here. This has been day 3 of Digital Inclusion Week, brought to you by Oak Hill Collaborative and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Tomorrow we're going to be having our last talk, also only online. It's going to be Adam Nickels teaches D&D minis and 3D printing, how you can save money with your hobbies by learning how to 3D print. Thank you all for joining. This is Anthony Hakes signing off. See you all tomorrow.